What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on just a few of the announcements from this past weekend's hasbropulsecon. Then we're going to be taking a quick look at the two new Target exclusive bobafett figures that finally hit the stores in the US last week. Then I'm going to be ranking all the new 2022 Mandalorian figures from the Vintage Collection. And finally, I'm going to be giving some details on a brand new subscriber giveaway contest for my channel. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 35 of Brett on Fett, and I got a lot to talk about today, but I want to start with the past weekend. On Friday and Saturday was Hasbro's PulseCon 2022, where they showcase a bunch of their new toy products coming out. And on the second day, on Saturday afternoon, they had their Star Wars segment. So I just wanted to give my thoughts on a few of those announcements from that segment. So let's take a look. So actually, before I get into the Star Wars stuff, I did want to touch very quickly on the new Indiana Jones line of figures from Hasbro, starting with their 6-inch scale line, which they're calling the Adventure Series. I think the Indy looks really awesome. The other figures look pretty good too. Sala is a little bit on the thin side, and Miriam's face looks a little off to me. But other than that, I think the figures look great, and I'm excited for indie fans that plan on collecting this. Me personally, I'm not going to be collecting this. I just don't have the room and the money to be collecting other lines. However, I did pre-order the Indiana Jones figure from their retro collection line. I just wanted to have this one piece. I just love the card back on this. It's very nostalgic, and I love the fact that Hasbro did not try to go with that fake weathering around the card back like they did with the Star Wars retro collection that I hate so much. I can't stand that fake weathering. They made a brilliant decision not to go with that for this Indiana Jones retro collection line. So I did pre-order that one. It's really awesome. But let's move on to Star Wars. So again, I'm not going to cover every single reveal from the Hasbro PulseCon for Star Wars. There's plenty of YouTubers out there that cover the whole thing, or you can go to Hasbro Pulse's YouTube channel and watch the video. But I did want to touch on a few things I just wanted to comment on, starting with the reveal of new Andor series figures for the Black Series and TVC. Starting with the Black Series, they've added Bix, they've added Luthen, and they've added Mon Mothma to the line. Now, this is in addition to 6 previous figures they had already revealed for Black Series. However, for the Vintage Collection, we only got 2 figure reveals, and they were 2 figures we already knew about because they were leaked on images from San Diego Comic-Con. And the first of those 2 is, of course, Cassian Andor. Pretty decent looking card back, a little bit dark, and he looks extremely glum in that picture. But the figure looks pretty good. It's pretty much a spitting image of the Black Series 6-inch scale version of this character. And the second reveal was that of Vel Sartha, the Rebel Fighter. Again, not a surprise since we already saw her in that leaked image. A much better looking card back on this one compared to the Cassian Andor card back, and the figure looks pretty decent. Now, my issue here is, once again, the Black Series is leaving the Vintage Collection in the dust when it comes to getting new figures from new Star Wars media. As you can see here from an image from a previous episode I did on Obi-Wan Kenobi, for that series, there's 11 figures have been revealed for the Black Series, as opposed to just 6 figures total for the Vintage Collection. And with Andor, it's even worse so far. We've gotten 9 figures revealed for the Black Series, as opposed to just 2 figures for the Vintage Collection. And so this is just blatantly lopsided between the 2 lines. We want for the Vintage Collection the same new figures that the Black Series gets when it comes to new media, because we're excited about these new shows and we want to get the new characters in our collections. And so it's not right to just emphasize one line over the other when it comes to new media. Hasbro really needs to work on balancing the scales between the Black Series and the Vintage Collection when it comes to this stuff. Next up, Hasbro did give us our first look at the new Hunter figure for the Bad Batch for the Vintage Collection. And I gotta say, the card back looks pretty awesome. I like the choice of image they went with. And the figure looks really good too. It's an all new sculpt. The only issue I have is that to me, it does look like an animated version of this character versus in the Vintage Collection, they've typically gone with a more realistic interpretation of figures from animation. And so I thought it was a little bit of an odd choice, but it does look good. So I don't really have a problem with it. I just thought it was a bit unusual that they went with this animated style. But it looks very good, and the head sculpt for Hunter looks amazing. So very impressed with this figure. And finally, I wanted to go through some of the pipeline reveals, starting with the Vintage Collection. We got several fairly predictable reissue announcements from Return of the Jedi, starting with Weequay, a great figure, fairly expensive in the secondary market. And then we got Woof, which is an excellent figure, maybe one of the best in the Vintage Collection. So happy to see that collectors will be able to get their hands on him. He's another very expensive one. Nikto and Cathaba. Now, the reissue announcement that did surprise me was Yak Face. This is the first ever reissue for the Vintage Collection Hasbro has announced that is from TVC 2.0. So this is still a fairly recent released figure that is still easy to come by. I mean, you can still find this guy online for anywhere between $25, $30. And so it was a very unusual choice. Unless they've decided they're going to reissue him on the Power of the Force card like they did exclusively with the Sail Barge. But I seriously doubt they're going to do that. I'm pretty sure this is just going to be a total straight reissue from the version we already got on a regular Return of the Jedi card. And speaking of odd pipeline announcements, they also revealed they're going to reissue Hauser from the Bad Batch in order to correct his name on the name pill, because the original release of this guy, which came in that Bad Batch 4-pack, had the name Ballast because of a name mix-up or name change, kind of last minute by the show. So I just thought this was unusual because I didn't think anybody's really asking for this correction. The only people that this is going to appease is people that are like extremely into collecting all the variants. So I'm sure variant collectors such as my man Only One Kenobi will be very happy to get their hands on Hauser with the corrected name. Next, they revealed a new Return of the Jedi specific Darth Vader with a removable helmet. This is cool because I'm sure they will use most of that Dark Times Vader we recently got that was so excellent. So excited to get this one. And then perhaps the best announcement, at least for Vintage Collection, from PulseCon is the announcement of getting the Tusken female warrior from the Book of Boba Fett. We've only had 2 figures from the Book of Boba Fett so far, including only one on an actual card back. And so I was very happy to get her. She was actually one of the ones I was hoping for in my video I did on TVC figures we need from Book of Boba Fett. So very happy to get this Tusken female warrior. I think she looks really cool, and she's going to make an excellent figure for the Vintage Collection. But of course, Black Series had to one-up Vintage Collection when it comes to new media figures. So naturally, Hasbro revealed 3 new figures for the Book of Boba Fett, starting with the Tusken Chieftain, very cool looking character. And then they have the Pike Gangster, another one on my list for TVC needs from that show. And finally, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Cad Bane. Because the Black Series needed more Cad Banes. I mean, this is now the 3rd Cad Bane figure that the Black Series has gotten. And still, Vintage Collection has gotten 0 Cad Banes for one of the coolest characters in all of Star Wars. And I'm not upset about it at all. I'm just kidding. I'm very upset about that. And lastly, I was really happy to hear that Hasbro announced a totally new sculpt for R2-D2 for the Black Series. Long overdue. R2 is a staple in the Star Wars toy universe, and so good to see they're going to do that, and I'm really hoping they put him on a 40th anniversary Return of the Jedi card, and I think they will. Okay, so over a year ago, way back in September of 2021, pre-orders went on sale for the Black Series droids-inspired Boba Fett figure. And several months after that, in late January of 2022, pre-orders went on sale for the Vintage Collection Boba Fett Morak figure. Now, both of these are Target exclusives here in the US, and it took a very long time, but finally, last week, these figures started arriving at doorsteps for the pre-orders and showing up on shelves at Targets throughout the US. And so I finally got my hands on both of these figures and just want to give you my thoughts on them, so let's take a quick look. Alright, so starting with the Black Series Droids Boba Fett, the first thing that jumps out at me with this is the artwork on the packaging. I love this artwork. It's inspired from the original Kenner Droids Boba Fett. And you've got it on the spine there, and then on the back you got that 50th Lucasfilm timeline. More artwork from that show. Just beautiful looking packaging, and it's really awesome how it velcros and opens up to display the figure inside. Just looking really excellent there, and more artwork again with a little write-up on the inside. Very impressed with the packaging on this. And here is the figure itself. I got two of these, of course. I had to have one loose since it is the Fett. And it's that same mold they've reused a million times. Just, painted with this droids-inspired animated colors. I love this color scheme. Now, the weapons are just this kind of dull plastic gray. And I think they did that so they wouldn't look too pronounced over the palish, colors. You do have a soft goods cape, which is really nice. I like the colors. It's very stiff though, but still very cool color scheme there. And you've got the jetpack that's painted that tan brown. So very muted colors, but I really like this alternate Boba Fett. The Vintage Collection version is one of my favorites of my collection, so I had to have the Black Series one. So very cool stuff. Next up for the Vintage Collection is the Boba Fett Morak from The Mandalorian. What an amazing looking card back. I love the image they used. I couldn't have picked a better image myself from the show for this version of Boba Fett. And so it's just a great card back. Looking on the back, you can see there's the rest of the wave, and this is VC 252. And of course, I had to get an extra one to have loose. So let's take a look at the figure itself. Very awesome, very similar to the other, the Book of Boba Fett version. We got the Tatooine version of Fett that came in that deluxe box. But he looks really good. It's got enough differences to be worth having, definitely. Like the cloth goods there. They are a little tethered, but you could trim that up a little bit with some little scissors. The paint apps on the weapons look really good. And I do like the soft plastic shoulder pads there to help, move his arms for more articulation. Jetpack looks awesome. There's more of the cloth goods. But perhaps my favorite is the helmet. They nailed the helmet on this. And, it's just the right size. And underneath reveals just an amazing head sculpt they've done with these Fett figures lately. But again, the helmet fits perfectly. It's just the right size. Unfortunately, the rangefinder does not rotate like on some other figures we've seen. It's just that squishy soft plastic. But that's the only downside of this figure I see. It's an awesome, awesome figure and great card back. All right, next up, 2022 has brought us some awesome Mandalorian figures for the Vintage Collection. And last week, along with those two Target exclusive Boba Fetts, we also got the Target exclusive Axe Woves. And so I want to add Axe Woves into the group of Mandalorian figures, male Mandalorian figures that kind of all use the same mold, or at least kit batches of the same mold. And so what I wanted to do was just take a look at all 5 of these Mandalorian figures we got and kind of compare them and rank them both by card back and by figures. So let's take a look. So here are the 5 Mandalorian figures I'll be comparing, starting with the Mandalorian Super Commando, Axe Woves, the Mandalorian Death Watch Airborne Trooper, the Mandalorian Super Commando Captain, and the Death Watch Mandalorian. Now, I'm first going to compare the card backs, and I've actually already placed these in order from worst to first for the card backs alone. So starting with 5th place, I have the Mandalorian Super Commando. This, of course, is from the Clone Wars. I am just not a fan of this image they use. It's way too dark. It's not vibrant at all. It just doesn't capture the really cool paint job of these troopers. So just don't like that image used. There's a look at the wave on the back, and it is VC243. But yeah, just not a great card back image in my opinion. Up next, in 4th place, I have Axe Woves from The Mandalorian. This is a really good image, taken straight from the show, which is always a bonus. You got his face in there and his helmet in the card image, so that's great. There weren't a lot of well-lit scenes this guy was in, so I was happy with that card back image. There's a look at the wave on the back, and you can see it's VC228. So good card back, solid card back, but 4th place. Up next for the card backs, I have the Death Watch Airborne Trooper. Solid card back, really nice looking image. Of course, it's that, it's taken from the animated Clone Wars, so it's, an animated artwork, which is fine to me. It's from the Clone Wars, so I'm okay with that. Bright colors, I like the blues and the hint of the orange, good use of the pill colors. There's a look at the wave, and it's VC247, so very good card back, but I had him at 3rd place. Up next, in 2nd place, I have the Mandalorian Super Commando Captain, again from the Clone Wars. Again, it's an animated style image, but look at those deep reds, and how awesome is that? This guy looks amazing. He's just too cool for school, man, and ever since I saw an image of this card back, I knew it was going to be one of my favorites. I know the artwork is probably rendered and not taken from the show, and that bothers some people, I'm sure, but I'm fine with it. There's a look at the wave on the back, and it's VC246. Very cool card back. He gets 2nd place. And then 1st place, the Death Watch Mandalorian. One of my favorite card backs in the vintage collection. I had this guy, I think, in my top 10 when I did about top 20 TVC card backs. What an excellent image taken straight from the show. They might have done some rendering, I'm not sure, but I know it's from the scene. And man, I just love the sparks flying behind him, the colors. What an awesome picture. One of my favorite card backs, it really is. And there's a look at the wave on the back, and it's VC219. So the Death Watch Mando definitely wins for best card back of the 5. Next, I have reordered these guys for ranking them in terms of the figure itself. So I've placed them in order from left to right, worst to first, starting with Axe Woves. Unfortunately, this guy's helmet is way too big, and it's a big fail. The paint apps are fine. They're very good, actually. And the head sculpt is excellent. I mean, this is one of the better head sculpts in the vintage collection. So really excellent head sculpt. The paint apps for his gun are very good, very weathered gunmetal gray look to him. So again, the paint apps are good, they're screen accurate. It's just that helmet. They really messed up by making this a wearable helmet versus a swappable head. It just looks like a bobblehead almost. It's so bad. It covers up his neck and everything. He just has a larger size head than like Bobafett's, and so they had to make this helmet extra big to fit over it, and it was a huge fail. This is a clear loser in the rankings for these figures. Next up is an excellent figure. It's the Death Watch Mandalorian from The Mandalorian. You see he's got the rangefinder that's movable. Excellent paint colors. I like his holster here, which is the same as Axe Woves actually, but excellent colors again. Highly posable, of course. His weapon looks good. I really like everything about this figure. It's just that he's going against 3 other excellent figures. And so next up in 3rd place, this was a hard choice. I kept going back and forth between this one and the Super Commando, but the Super Commando Captain, look at those spikes on his helmet and on his shoulder pads. Such a cool design. I mean, this guy looks awesome. The downside is his holsters, which you'll see on the other figures as well, and his weapons are just this very dull plastic gray. I don't know why they did this on these Clone Wars Mandos. I'm going to show you the only downside to otherwise a very awesome figure. I love the paint apps on his jetpack. And I think the only reason I put him in 3rd as opposed to 2nd is I wasn't too impressed with the weathering on the paint apps. He was a little bit too clean in my opinion, but still excellent figure. So in second place, I had the Mandalorian Super Commando. What an amazing paint job on this. Now this one they did nail the kind of weathered look with the paint just running down. And then look at that helmet with the black hand over there. It's one of my favorite helmets of all time in TVC, I think. Again, you've got the kind of dull plastic weapon and kind of a dull holster there. The jetpack is not quite as awesome of a paint job. I wish it would match the helmet. That other kind of gunmetal gray. It's a little bit duller, but still, man, the chest plate and the helmet really sold it for me for that figure. And finally, the clear-cut winner for best figure of these 5 Mandos is the Deathwatch Airborne Trooper. What an amazing figure. I love the paint apps on this guy from head to toe. He's got the movable rangefinder. Just look at those blues and grays and silvers and the hint of that red and orange. I mean, it's just excellent. I don't know, maybe I'm partial to blues. I am a little partial to blues, but he just looks so good. I mean, from every angle, this figure looks excellent. Again, he's got the dull plastic weapons just like all 3 of those Clone Wars ones do. That is the only downside of this guy. He is one of my favorites, and he's up there for figure of the year in my opinion. Overall, with the exception of X-Woves, I'm extremely happy with all of these Mandalorian figures. The only thing that could be better is if Hasbro were to give us a Gar Saxon figure for TVC. That would be really cool. Fingers crossed that happens someday.
Than anticipated.
Alright, so finally I want to talk about details for my new subscriber giveaway contest, and it has to do with the new Walmart exclusive wave. Now we talked about the Target exclusive figures that shipped out last week. Well, this week the Walmart exclusive wave figures containing the R2-D2 from Empire Strikes Back, a Stormtrooper from A New Hope, 2 Bespin Guards from Empire Strikes Back, and the Imperial Gunner from Return of the Jedi. That wave started shipping out to customers this week. And so you guys have heard all about the packaging woes we have here in the US for Walmart exclusives, how so many of them are just terribly packed, terribly shipped, and show up damaged all the time. And I know that story is getting so old and so played out, and I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing about it. And so I thought, well, how could we turn that experience into something fun or funny, something entertaining for my channel? And so what I'm doing is I'm going to have you guys predict for my pre-orders how many of the figures show up damaged. And in my case, I ordered 6 total figures, 1 each of every figure, except for R2-D2 I ordered 2. And you don't have to predict which figures will be damaged and which will not. You just have to predict the number. And by the way, I will be opening my packages for this order on camera for my next episode of Brett on Fett, episode 36. And on that same episode, I will announce the winner of the competition. Now, by now, you're probably wondering what's going to determine whether or not a figure is damaged. And I'm just going to tell you that I'm going to be going by Walmart standards here, meaning I'm not going to be very picky on what I consider undamaged. And for the damaged figures, basically what I'm looking for are major visible creasing, major visible scratches, and bubble dents. And so if I get any of those things, I'm going to deem the figure damaged. I'm not looking for like minor edge wear or even those small corner dings. I'm going to deem those as acceptable in this case. And there might be a few subjective gray areas that, comes up, but I will have the final say. I will have the final judgment call, and I'm not going to entertain any arguments over whether or not something is damaged or not in your opinion. It's all going to be based on my opinion. So what are you going to win in this competition? Well, it's going to be your choice of one figure from an assortment of vintage collection figures, and I'll put up a photo here of the assortment that you get to choose from. And on the next video where we announce the winner, I will give a more detailed look at each figure so you can make an educated choice. But there are some good ones on there, including the brand new Boba Fett Morak. Sorry, Black Series fans, I do not have a Black Series figure to give away at this time. So for the contest rules, I will put them down in the description of this video, but let's quickly go over them. Rule number 1, you must be a subscriber to my YouTube channel, Brett on Fett. Rule number 2, you must leave your prediction comment for the contest in the comment section of this video. Rule number 3, you must put down your prediction for number of damaged figures in my order. You don't need to list the amount of undamaged, just the amount of damaged figures. And remember, I have 6 total figures in my order, so your number should not be more than 6. If you put 7 or more, your comment will be voided from the competition. Rule number 4, very important, you must get your competition comment posted by noon Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, October 8th, 2022. That's noon Eastern Standard Time, October 8th, 2022. You must get your comment in. Comments received after that time will not be considered. Rule number 5, in the event that multiple subscribers accurately predict the number of damaged figures, I will simply take the names of all of those people and do a drawing from those names to select one winner. If nobody accurately predicts the number of damaged figures, I will simply take the next best guess and also do a drawing if necessary for that. And finally, if you've made it this far in my video, I'm going to reward you with a huge helpful hint. If you follow me on Instagram, I will be posting pictures of the packages of my order as they arrive. And so you'll get to see the condition of the packaging and use that to help make your decision on your prediction for number of damaged figures. Now, I will warn you that just because some of these figures may show up in mailer bags doesn't guarantee damage. For example, the YouTube channel Paul's Collectibles, Paul announced that he received his order already, and every single one of them showed up in mailer bag envelopes, and every single one of them arrived in great condition. So again, the packaging itself doesn't guarantee, whether or not the figure is going to be damaged. But I would still much prefer to see what the packaging looks like before making my prediction. So I still think it'd be a huge advantage for you guys to check out my Instagram photos of those packages before you enter the competition. Again, it's not a requirement of the competition to follow me on Instagram. It's just a helpful bonus. So that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Please remember to hit that like button if you liked this video, and please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Also, don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram and on Twitter. Take care, and we'll see you next time.